The Glock 43x and Glock 48 actually has a shorter grip with the 15-round magazine than the SIG does. Hey everyone, I'm Brett, and welcome to Nightwood Guns. Today we are looking at the Palmetto State Armory Micro Dagger magazine. Now this is a 15-round magazine for a Glock 43x. I have a Glock 48, or of course the PSA Micro Dagger. Now I have long been a proponent of using factory or OEM magazines in any firearm that you plan on using for self-defense. That is of course with the exception of magazines like Mechgar, who makes a lot of magazines for firearm manufacturers like CZ for example, and of course quality aftermarket magazines for 1911s such as Wilson Combat or Trip Research Cobra mags. My biggest issue with the 43x and the 48 is that it comes with a 10-round magazine, and when you have competitors putting out 15-round magazines in about the same size, it's a hard pill to swallow. That's why if you're somebody with a 43x or a 48, I think it's worthwhile to test out these higher capacity magazines. Now, of course, Shield Arms came to market first with a 15-round magazine for the Glock 43x and Glock 48, but I was one of those people that had a lot of problems with them. They just wouldn't cycle for me. And before everyone gets into the comments and starts screeching about how their Shield Arms mags have been perfect, I think at this point we figured out that Glock tolerances can vary, and that is what causes the issues with Shield Arms magazines, because they are a completely metal housing, and if Glock tolerances that are polymer are different, it can shift around in there or hit at a weird angle and cause malfunctions. Either way, if it's not good in all Glocks, I'm just simply not interested in it. So when I saw the design of the Palmetto State Armory Micro Dagger magazine, where they have the polymer up front and then the metal in the back, that way they can allow for Glock tolerance issues while fitting in 15 rounds in this magazine, it definitely piqued my interest. And on top of that, unlike the Shield Arms magazines, you do not have to replace your magazine release. Luckily, I was able to get two, and through this one I have 1,000 rounds, and through this one I have 500 rounds. And while they performed very well, I did do something to them. So be sure to stay tuned to see what I recommend doing to these magazines to make sure they run the best for you. If you enjoy or appreciate this video, the links in the description below are the place to be if you'd like to support the channel. And I would like to thank my patrons for purchasing these magazines for the channel so that I can test them out and give you guys an honest review. Today's video simply would not exist without help from my friends over at Handle It Grips, who decided to sponsor today's video. Handle It Grips are my #1 recommended stick-on grip for any firearm. I love the really high coverage that you get. That way you can get a nice high grip on the gun and make sure that texture is hitting your support hand to help you manage recoil a little better and to give you more control over your firearm. I know that when I was testing out the Micro Dagger magazines, I was really glad that I had these grips, because when you start putting that high of a round count through a gun, your hands get a little sweaty and your grip can start to loosen, so making sure you have positive traction on the gun definitely keeps your groups tight and your shots on target. My favorite texture is this edge texture that feels just like stippling. I'm a huge fan of this. This is what goes on all of my guns that get Handle It grips. But if you're someone who prefers more sandpapery style grips, but you still want to carry it without tearing up your shirts, I do recommend their new Elite texture. It's like a softer sandpapery grip. Very grippy, especially with wet hands. Highly recommend it. So check out my friends over at Handle It Grips and get yourself a set of either the Edge texture, Elite texture, or both. They're awesome. Now let's hop into the Palmetto State Armory Micro Dagger magazines. So I did, like I said, I have 1,000 rounds through this one, and I have 500 through this one, and I have had 0 malfunctions across the board with all ammo types used, including my defensive ammo, which is 124 plus P HST hollow points. They work perfectly with my Empire Katana V3 magwell. I am definitely impressed with these magazines, and I am ready to trust them for everyday carry and self-defense, but I did do something to them before I started shooting, because since it took me a while to get these magazines, I was able to look and see what other issues people were having so that I could prepare to make these things as reliable as possible. So I'm going to pop up a couple of pictures here of the inside of the magazine bodies, and as you can see, there is like polymer or plastic or rubber. It's hard to describe exactly what it is, but it's flashing inside the magazine body. And it was catching the follower. I noticed right away when I got this magazine loading and unloading it, the follower was actually catching on those little pieces of flashing that were sticking out from the inside of the mag. Now, I did not shoot the magazines in this configuration because if you've been around my channel for the last couple of months, you will know that like everything has not been working for me, and I'm sick of it. I want stuff to work, so I want to give it the best shot of working. So I actually went in there with an X-Acto knife and cut out as much of the pieces as I could, and then I went through there with sandpaper on a dowel and just rubbed that flashing down to get the magazine body as smooth as possible. And then of course I rinsed it out, got all of the debris out of there, put it back together, and took it out to the range. Now I realize that for a lot of you out there, having to clean up the inside of the magazines like that is kinda janky and is cause for concern. And I'm gonna be honest, I 100% agree. I know some people are gonna chime in the comments that 10 rounds in the magazine is enough. They're gonna stick with OEM and factory because they know it's 100% reliable. That's probably the best common sense choice you could make. However, I've taken a recent interest in trying to maximize the performance of my firearms. Capacity is one of those, and I have thoroughly tested and vetted these after cleaning up the insides of the magazines, and I'm definitely 100% confident in how they ran for me. However, that's all I can do. I can just tell you my experience and how these two specific magazines worked for me. Obviously, with Glock, we know that their quality control is top notch, and every magazine that's leaving their factory is going to work. At least 99.999%. There's a reason everyone asks, does it take Glock mags? I can't really speak to Palmetto State Armory's quality control on the Micro Dagger mags because we haven't had the sheer volume of them go out as we have had with Glock factory magazines. So I'm going to recommend the Palmetto State Armory Micro Dagger magazines for your Glock 43x, Glock 48 if you clean up the inside of the magazine bodies and vet them yourself. Another issue that I saw people mentioning is it looks like the base plate is almost bent or bulging at the bottom. Just know that I dropped these things on the ground a bunch of times and never had it pop off, and I never had any reliability issues. So even though it might not stand up straight on a table, just know that as far as actual usability goes, it's not an issue, at least so far in 1,500 rounds between the two mags. Also, for anyone who is curious, you know how with a lot of the magazine carriers for the Glock 43x and Glock 48, you have to pick whether you're running OEM magazines or if you're running Shield Arms magazines? Well, I have good news. The Palmetto State Armory Micro Dagger magazines fit in the OEM Glock magazine carriers. Clicks in perfectly. It is a perfect fit. PSA definitely knocked it out of the park with these magazines, and one of my favorite things about it is when you actually look at it inside a Glock 43x or a Glock 48, and you compare it to a P365 or XL 15 round magazine, and you line up the slides, the Glock 43x and Glock 48 actually has a shorter grip with the 15 round magazine than the SIG does. In my opinion, these magazines make the 43x and the 48 completely viable. And that's kind of par for the course with Glock, right? Like, they create something that works, but isn't necessarily ideal or up to modern standards, and then the aftermarket comes in and takes care of them. I hope you enjoyed today's video. It was great seeing you again, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm Brett, and this was Nightwood Guns. Nightwood out.